Welcome back. Now, the call for the restructuring of Nigeria is now trending again. More and more people have suddenly begun talking about it, and there are reasons for this. As I speak, 27 of Nigeria's 36 states have not been able to pay salaries for over 5 months. The reason is because their share of the federal monthly allocation has dwindled so badly that what they get is not even able to keep the government running. Talk more of paying salaries. And of course, we all know why this is happening. The money coming into the Federation account has plummeted because of the sustained fall in the price of oil, which is Nigeria's main revenue earner. The governors are now asking for a review of the revenue sharing formula so the states could get more than they currently get in the south, in the country, I should say. Now, in the southeast of the country, IPOB, that's the indigenous peoples of Biafra, is increasing the tempo of the call now for an independent Biafra state. And even those who would not listen to them in the past are suddenly giving them a listening ear because things are tough in the country. People are hungry. In the South, militancy is rearing its ugly head again. And this time, the militants are not just asking for resource control, they are asking for independence for the Niger Delta region. It's against this background and more that the renewed call for restructuring of the country is finding new ground, even in unlikely places. Not quite long ago, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar spoke in favor of restructuring during the launch of a book focused on restructuring in Abuja. But then, does this country really need restructuring? Or is it its people that actually need restructuring? Joining me now to discuss this broad topic on the restructuring of Nigeria is Chido Onuma, who is a journalist and also an activist. And he's just written a book titled We Are All Biafran. So he's the author of that book. And let me just say right away that this is not the very first book Chido would be writing. He's written severally on the topic of restructuring. And as a matter of fact, the last one I think I read has to do with reclaiming Nigeria, so to speak. Chido, thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
First, let's talk about the book. The title you have chosen, some people would say quite controversial. We Are All Biafrans. Could you expatiate more on that?
Thank you. The idea of this book, there are different reasons why I decided to put this book together at this time.
At this time.
But also to the issue of the title you referred to. The idea was to provoke, not necessarily to provoke to annoy people, but to provoke and to
quite a catchy title, I must say.
Get people to start thinking. Of course, there are those who want to say, when you discuss Biafra, they say, oh, you can't go there, you shouldn't go there, that topic is all off limit. Choosing this topic was also meant to steer that conversation, like whether we like it or not, Biafra was or still is an essential part of the history of this country. So we have to, as Dr. Madunagu wrote in the prologue to the book, says we have to come to terms with the Biafran reality. We have to settle account, in his own words, with Biafra. So the idea basically in choosing the title was to say, look, we are all casualties. And it's for both sides. For those who are concerned about the Biafra agitation, I say, let's not just abuse people. Let's not call people names. Let's discuss. For those who want to actualize Biafra, I say, wait a minute. People all over Nigeria are also going through what you're going through. So
people have been marginalized.
We are all casualties. Why don't we just sit down at the table of nationhood and discuss these issues?
Why do you think, for instance, that you know, the call for the restructuring of Nigeria seems to be growing again? I mean, of course, there was a time when, you know, it was really like the trend, so to speak. At some point, groups like Pronaco had to call their own conference and they came up with their own draft constitution. And after a while, the whole thing died down and now it is coming back again. And of course, no thanks to the agitation, of course, for the sovereign state of Biafra.
Well, there are two basic issues here. and somehow people tend to conflate the issues. One is that the issue of Nigeria itself, whether we've been able to settle the Nigerian question. And now I'm referring to why this agitation, maybe sometimes it stops, soon after it comes up again. It just tells you that we've not been able to really resolve the Nigerian question. The second, of course, is the issue of the way the country itself has been managed. So people feel marginalized, people feel alienated. Because even in a country like the US that seeks to grow a perfect country, so to say, you find out that there is still agitation within groups. Even sometimes groups in places like Texas would say we want to have a separate country. And US, with all its beauty and majesty, is perhaps one of the most unequal society in the world. So what does that tell us? It also tells us that the issue of agitation won't necessarily go away, or that restructuring Nigeria is not a silver bullet that is going to solve all our problems. What it means, therefore, is that we need to settle the Nigerian question. And I raised the issues in this book that who is a Nigerian? What does it mean to be a Nigerian? That existential confidence, as I describe it, in Nigeria, people feel comfortable, people feel confident of calling themselves a Nigerian, knowing that in any part of this country, anywhere you go to in Nigeria, you feel protected, you feel belong. That is the question we need to resolve before anything else.
And to be candid, that it's certainly not there, because fact is that there are certain parts of this country you will go to, even when you are not told, you can feel the hostile atmosphere, that you're not wanted in this part and that you're not from this
There are Nigerians who can't stand, just get up to there and say they want to go to certain parts of the country, whether they are right in their estimation or judgment or not, but that's the way they feel. There are millions of Nigeria from the north, from the east, from the west, who can't stand up and say, I'm going to this part of the country. And
my problem is, how can politics resolve that? I mean, because this is something of the subconscious, whether you like it or not. So how do you get the, you know, for instance, the Hausa man, the Igbo man, the Yoruba man, to change that kind of consciousness into something that is more accepting of people from other parts of the country and seeing them as one?
You've raised a very interesting question. That is what we needed to do from the outset. The British, who governed this country for many years, who created it, created a country in their own image, in their own interest. What our leaders failed to do at independence was to create or recreate a Nigeria in the image of Nigerians and for the interest of Nigerians. And unfortunately, just within 6 years of independence, we had soldiers who came in and distorted everything this country stood for, everything that on which this country was created. So you have a situation where people do not feel comfortable with each other as Nigerians. And I also I talked a bit about that in this book. I say, why is it that 56 years after independence, people see themselves more, as you refer to, as Hausas, Igbos, Yoruba, and every other thing in between, rather than as Nigerian. And I can give you a quick example. Many years ago, I was in London. A Ghanaian friend of mine who is from northern Ghana, is a lawyer, speaks Hausa. He told me a story that he came to Nigeria once, and he was making fun of me that he came to Nigeria. He had some problems at the airport, and he saw this immigration or customs officer who had the name, and he thought he could recognize it, and he spoke the language to the man, and the man left the Nigerian. He was because to the man. He left the Nigerian, and he said, what kind of country is this? And ever since he told me that story, it's become something I've been thinking about and say, so how do we create a Nigerian? We'd like to talk about the situation in Singapore, what Lee did those days, and there is a part of the story that talked about growing this country. So you have to bring young people from different parts of the country and put them together so they grow up, you know, reflecting on their differences. Something close to what the NYSC, which has been bastardized, was
completely bastardized.
You
because
know,
now you could actually choose not to go.
You see
places,
somebody who was born in Lagos, schooled in Lagos, is from Lagos, wants to serve. When I served many years ago, I spent much of my life in Lagos, went to university in Calabar as a student activist. I traveled virtually all state, the 19-state structure of Nigeria then. I was praying to serve in Maiduguri because up until then, Borno State and Sokoto State, the old Borno and old Sokoto, were the only two states I had not been to. So eventually I got Borno. I was so ecstatic. The day I finished my NYC, I took a bus from Maiduguri to Sokoto to be able to tell myself that I've crossed to nook and cranny of this country. How many young men? You can't blame them. Of course, there are so many reasons. Security. So you see a situation where it's so difficult. Many of our young men and women know the streets of Paris and London and New York better than they know of any country. Why is the reason? Nation building is not a tea party. Our leaders, unfortunately, or rather our rulers, have failed in that responsibility of building this country. There is no reason why immediately after independence that the government that took over shouldn't have constructed a rail line linking the major cities from the north, east, west, and south. Canada as a country is 10 times the physical size of Nigeria. So if you put as big as Nigeria, or as big as we pretend Nigeria is, if you put Nigeria in 10 places, that's the size of Canada. Yet there is a train track from the east coast in the Pacific, from the west coast in the Pacific Ocean to the east coast in the Atlantic Ocean, which takes a week. And it was deliberate, it was conscious effort of leaders at independence. Every country, the same story you can talk about Ghana. Say, what did the leaders do at independence to build a nation out of the contraption that the colonialists, you know, left behind. So we didn't do that, and the situation got worse. Then coupled with economic downturn, and so what we have almost a disaster in our hands. So my argument is that now is the time to look back, as Achebe used to say, and realize quickly where this rain started beating us, and say, what are the low-hanging fruits we can pick in terms of this nature? Because let's make no mistake, those who say, well, restructuring, or try to take lightly the issue of restructuring, my argument is that we have left that stage. It's no longer the debate. The debate is, when we restructure, how should we restructure? Because it's like Nigeria is on the precipice. So the argument of restructuring or not is not there. How do we restructure is the issue. Yeah.
Very good. I mean, let's face it, successive governments, this country, successive governments have just not been able to, should I say, summon the political will to actually do this. Why because it would appear each time you talk about restructuring, the only language or what the government sees with restructuring is nothing other than secession, and so it's a topic the government doesn't want to discuss at all. I'm not just talking about military, even civilian governments we've had in this country. No,
I agree with you. There could be a number of reasons for this. Maybe part of it could be the way the question is posed, the way and manner those who pose the question pose it. And I think I'll quickly get back to that. But I wanted to go back to the issue we were discussing earlier about what the government could do. And I'm not sure if it's in one of the essays in this book. I say, why, for example, you didn't have, maybe as a follow-up to something like the NYSC, you encourage families. You can give families incentives so that if you are from the East, if you marry from the West, you get some kind of tax rebate or something. We needed to have some creative ideas about how to build this unity. It's not enough to say the unity of Nigeria is not negotiable or Nigeria. No nation comes giving. Nations make effort to build a formidable and strong and prosperous nation. You could do other things like, oh, maybe give names. If you are from the East, you are Igbo, you encourage your middle name to be Hausa. If you are Hausa, encourage your middle name to be Yoruba. So that in a generation of two would have grown a generation of young people. I mean, I'm Igbo, I'm married, my wife is from Ogun State. My kids bear Igbo and Yoruba names. And people...
I'm Yoruba, my wife is from Ogun State. My wife is actually from the East. And funny enough, my mother is from the East as well.
And people...
We're achieving integration.
When people read this book, they say, oh, how come your children bear Yoruba names? I say, of course, their mother is Yoruba. So as if Yoruba is some, you wonder that I'm Igbo, my kids bear Yoruba name. Yorubas are part of Nigeria, Igbo are part of, and somebody would feel scandalized that how come your children bear Yoruba name? As if Yorubas are like Chinese from some ancient place, and why should you? So that tells you how the depth of this crisis. But let me leave that and come, to the issue you raised about the fears our leaders. It's partly because we do not have or have never had genuine good leaders in this country. They do not know what the consequences of their action is. They are not creative, they are not thinking right. For anybody to look at a country like this now and say, oh, the issue of restructuring is not something, I mean...
Because for them, restructuring basically means breaking away, disintegrating.
It doesn't. And why do I say so? Why do I say that our leaders simply are not thoughtful, they are not creative? This nation was founded as a federal republic. In 1960, we had 3 regions. Subsequently, it went into 4 when the Midwest region was created. So what are we talking about? This country was created as a federal republic. In 1960, 50% of the revenues coming to the region came on the basis of derivation, what you could get from your locality. Then you gave some to the federal government and so on and so forth. People are arguing or talking as if Nigeria has always been run like this, that this is how the country was at the beginning, or this was the basis on which the country was created. No, all of this distortion took place from the moment the first coup happened, and of course the effect, the civil war and so on. So why would anybody not say, let's, on the basis, and I'm not saying let's go back to the regions. So much has happened between 1966 and now. But the same principles that operated then can still apply now. You have 36 states. There is no reason why states should not be allowed to take half of whatever comes from their state and pay tax or royalty or whatever it is to the federal government. There is no reason why states should not be allowed to manage and create their local government. It's an anomaly. It doesn't make sense. Why do you have a federal republic where the federal government creates local government? In a federation, there are basically 2 tiers of government, either the federal government or the states, or federal government or the regions, or federal government, as in the case of Canada, the provinces, and so on. So let the states manage their local government. That's the only way you can bring proper governance to the people. Federal government does not need to create local government for the state and manage those local government. Because of that, what you have is a situation where the states just abdicate their responsibility. They don't see the local government as their own. They allow them, they exploit them and allow them to do whatever it is they want to do. The truth is that the people who, those who really oppose the idea of restructuring are those who want to lead this country into a civil war. They are the enemies of Nigeria. They are the ones who do not want to see this country united to be a prosperous nation.
What's your take on those who have said, look, this government should probably start by looking at the report of the last national conference now organized under former President Goodluck Jonathan, and then the government coming out to say, well, it hasn't got the time to look at that report. I mean, what's your take on that?
Well, it's a sad commentary on the level of governance in Nigeria, when I think it was a week or two prior to the launch of this book, the president had said something to the effect about consigning it to the archives, and that he hadn't even been briefed about it.
We also had the Obasanjo conference report, also nothing.
My take is that there is nothing wrong for the government to revisit it. If the government feels that there is nothing in that committee that it thinks it can take going forward, well and good in its own wisdom. If it feels that, okay, there are few areas that we can begin to talk about. And I was at a TV program earlier today, and I was asked the same question about the constitution amendment. And also I said, for me, it doesn't simply make sense. How do you begin to review a constitution when it's like your house is on fire and you're trying to say, oh, okay, let me, I don't know how the description fits in here, let me do one or two things, rather than trying to put off the fire. This country is literally on fire. And people are talking about the 1999 Constitution is nothing but a military decree writ large. How do you begin to amend or change a military decree?
But it's still the Constitution. It's still the law.
It's still the law.
We can't just discard it.
No, it's still the law. We can't discard it. Of course, we can't. Nothing says we can't. We can't discard.
We can't discuss in a vacuum, so to speak. There has to be some kind of guidance, and that law should guide us. And if the law is wrong, the Constitution is wrong, there's nothing wrong in changing it.
No, but I'm saying is that this country, let's forget we know how the Constitution came about.
Exactly.
For me, essentially, that Constitution is nothing but a military decree. The civilian government that came to power in 1999 did not see that decree or Constitution before they came to power. It was after they came to power that it was handed. They had no input in that, and Nigerians really had no input in that. So let's not be fanciful about this argument. We are saying that our country is on the brink. The Constitution should be the last thing on our mind. It's what 180 or 170 million Nigerians want to do. I mean, if this country slides into a civil war tomorrow, what would you be doing? You sit down and be talking.
Are you then opposed to what the National Assembly is doing? Because whether we like it or not, they are representatives of the people that were actually elected by the same Nigerians you're talking about.
I'm opposed to the National Assembly. I'm opposed to what they are doing. I mean, it's just a farcical exercise that would not take us anywhere. If the National Assembly is serious, perhaps they should be the one. Not that I expect them to do it, but they should start raising the argument or debate and say, look, the problem we face in this country today is not about the Constitution. It's about the structure of this country. So what do we do? Do we need to make new laws that will create...
and that would not be out of place.
Yeah, it will not be out of place. They can do that rather than busying themselves talking about wardrobe allowance and cars and immunity and pension and all. That just tells you how unserious this bunch of people, how unserious they are. If they are serious, if they realize the clear and present danger, they can meet and say, look, they can push something to the executive.
As a matter of fact, if you ask me, it should begin from them. And,
yeah.
You know, every agitation for the restructuring of this country should actually be channeled to the National Assembly, because they actually have the power to kickstart
something. But of course, you know why people won't do that, because, I mean, this is essentially a do-nothing assembly. They are not going to be bothered about this issue. My expectation is that if they are serious, people could actually send proposals to them, and they sit down and look at this and say, look, these are the kind of things coming from our constituency people, that this the voice of the people, as they say, you table it. Say, if you are a senator, member of House of Rep representing 1 or 2, 3 million people, and your 2, 3 million people are agitated and say, we feel alienated, there is no inclusiveness in this country, we are this and that. You expect that those people would raise that issue. So when you have 2, 3, 4 different sections of the country doing that, by then you would have had a group of senators and members of the House coming together and say, okay, what do we do? How can we create a law? Is it something that would have to, whether a referendum, whatever it is we need to do, push it to the executive and say, look, this is where we think this country is headed. But they are not likely to do that. So people resort to self-help more or less. And we have to address that, whether we like it or not.
Chidonoma, thank you very much for coming on the program, and thank you for your contributions.
It's a pleasure.
And of course, well, let's just hope our leaders are listening and that they read your book. You've actually written a number of books. Let's just hope the leaders are reading them and not just putting them, in their library.
Well, they really have no choice. Let's hope they do. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, that's it on the program. If you want to watch it again, it's simple. Just go to our website, tv360nigeria.com. You'll find this video and lots more there. You can also watch us on YouTube by subscribing to our YouTube channel, which is, of course, youtube.com/TV360Nigeria. Now, do subscribe to get latest videos and updates. And you can join us on Google+. That's at TV360Nigeria. Or like us on Facebook. The address is facebook.com/TV360online. You can follow us on Twitter. Our handle is at TV360online. Thank you again for watching. We're back again next week. See you then.